Well, thank you for joining us this morning. It's nice to get to chat with you.
My great pleasure. I normally would have done this interview while seated at my drum set, which is on the other side of the studio, but I'm midway through upgrading my setup. I'm speaking into and looking at this new camera that's part of this new studio monitor. That's
Well, it looks and sounds great. It's very clear.
Oh, good, good, good. I mean, normally I have these additional cameras and microphones um, and stuff, but this is the new. You see how it like
I
automatically
was gonna say,
Oh,
it looks like
tunes?
it's been following you. By the way, hi,
wow.
Peter. Nice to meet you.
This is my good friend Matt Smith right here. Wonderful.
Hi, is that Matt with two T's?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Hi, Matt.
Yeah,
All
nice
right,
to meet
guys.
you.
So, what do you want to talk about?
Well, I mean, I just wanted to sit down and have a chat with you. I really was inspired by seeing you and getting to meet you at the Young Lions masterclass. So special thanks to Gilbert and Bob Magnuson for introducing us.
Hmm.
And I really liked some of the things that you said, the way you talked about music. And I mean, I've been doing a series of podcasts, and most recently I was fortunate to get to talk with Chris Potter, which was very wonderful. So thank you, Chris. And he sat with us for about an hour. It was really great. So I've just been trying to reach out to musicians that I admire, and I've been kind of starting in the San Diego area, just with people like Gilbert, Christopher Holiday, certain people that are in town that I have access to, that I go and see on a weekly basis, whether they're jam sessions and stuff. So, but Bob Madison has been really a fan of this, so he's kind of been connecting me with some other people outside of the city. So it's been real great. So special thanks to Bob for that.
Any friend of Bob Magnuson is a friend of mine.
Well,
Right on.
perfect. So, I mean, honestly, Peter, I was curious about some of your setup at the studio. I mean, I got to watch some of your live streams, and with this whole new era that we've kind of been thrust upon us, I've kind of embraced it and have started doing a lot of streaming and all that stuff. But I really admired kind of what you were doing at your spot. Maybe you could talk a little bit about it. I mean, it's definitely the future. It's here, and I thought you did a wonderful job.
I'm happy to speak about it. I feel that whatever I say is going to be a bit incomplete because that picture is worth 1,000 words when you get to see it in action. And again, just to explain, the computer that normally was kind of command central for all of that is being replaced, and so I have things half connected to the interface and so on. But what I did was I converted a fairly straightforward and simplistic setup that I had in place while I was doing one-on-one video responses for a series of classes I've done at artistworks.com. So they came down from Napa up north and installed two high quality Canon video cameras, and one was like a front master shot, and then we had an overhead. And it was occurring to me pretty quickly that these lesson responses would be more effective if I could get a side camera view, for example, of the snare drum to show more closely what I was doing, either on a practice pad or on the snare drum or on the hi-hat, and then maybe a dedicated foot cam so students could see the feet in action, because the drums are one of the few things, other than a church organist or a helicopter pilot, I don't know what else, maybe a race car driver, that requires the use of all four limbs in such a coordinated or uncoordinated fashion. So anyway, I'm trying to figure out how to add more cameras, and the initial setup that we had going here was analog. So we were coming out of the cameras more or less a composite video signal, and that's that's a fancy word for the red, blue, and green cables
Right.
that you would plug into your old VHS deck, or coming out of the VHS into your stereo amplifier or TV. And so it was a clunky proposition, especially with newer cameras using HDMI. And I tried to combine or intermingle these two platforms, and it wasn't working. So I got to speaking with my friend and always very forward-thinking drummer Dave Weckel. And Dave was using a system that had been put together by Roland, the folks that make keyboards and electronic drum kits. And so they had a video camera selection, kind of a mixer, just more like a camera one, camera two,
like a switcher,
a switcher. Pretty pricey, which just reflected the point in time when the technology could be, brought into someone's non-professional studio environment. And as all things go, the next generation of stuff is generally that much, it's further along, and it's less expensive. So there's a company named Blackmagic, and they have these switching devices called ATEMs, ATEM. And so I got one of those, and voila, I could hook up 4 HDMI cameras. So I changed the output from these Canons to HDMI, and I added 2 Zoom cameras, and that's different from the Zoom platform. These are made by a company named Zoom, which is based in Japan, and Zoom North America. They sell those cameras here. And so I added those, and I had a real snazzy 4-camera setup going. San Diego guitarist Peter Sprague and I were talking. This was all a result, of course, of the lockdown and the pandemic. And so we had to find a better means of communicating with our students, certainly better than just the camera built into the laptop. And so everyone was reaching out to everyone else. So peer institutions were asking questions or providing answers. And Peter and I somehow got in a discussion loop on this, and he said, "Hey, you can piggyback one ATEM onto another. So because of the piggybacking, I lose 1 camera input, but instead of only 4, I had 7 inputs." And thanks to a lot of work by a young engineer who does most of my engineering here in my studio, we figured out how best to utilize one computer for audio and another one dedicated for going online with the video content, and how to do the proper synchronization by means of offsetting by a certain number of frames, and fairly complicated stuff. And this was back in the days when the Zoom platform, the Zoom that we're speaking on and appearing on, when music was or audio was just not such a priority. And as I understood the technology, the Zoom platform would prioritize the video data packets, and so audio was minimized so as not to take up too much of the valuable, I guess, bandwidth. And the story I heard was that the son of one of the Zoom person was, "Hey, Dad, we have to make the music sound better. Audio's important." And he was like, "Well, go ahead, figure it out." And so they did. And all of a sudden, Zoom became viable,
right,
for music, because and again, it was this sort of above ground, underground network of people saying, hey, change this one setting to
Yeah.
this. And all of a sudden it got really good. So I had all these cameras, and then I started adding like a tracking rail that a little motor that the
Right.
camera could
Yeah.
move on, and it would auto pan and do all this stuff. And it dawned on me that the students were still stuck with the camera built into the lid of the laptop.
Right.
Also, because they were sudden, I don't know if guests would be the word, almost intruders in the homes of their families or parents.
Right.
They were relegated to the garage, or it always seemed like the place that had the greatest distance from the drum set to the Wi-Fi router.
Yeah, I was gonna say they had the worst internet spot.
And so I said, well, this isn't great. So I've got a great platform to present stuff to students. And the cool thing about Zoom is when you record it, of course, the student could replay it. But I needed to be able to see and hear what they were doing. So
of course,
USC was the Thornton School of Music at University of Southern California. They were very proactive and hip. And they supported this idea I had of a lesson pod. And we basically recreated, just on a slightly simpler scale, what I had going here in my home studio. And so the students could book the lesson pod. And so for any students that were in the Southern California area, they could book the room. It would be sanitized.
I see.
Between uses. Now, this was, I keep going, back in the day, when there was no consensus on how COVID was being spread. And so surface contact.
Yeah, it was so new. No one was sure.
No one knew. So there was a whole protocol for refreshing or ventilating the air that was in the room. And also a professional cleaning service would come in and wipe everything down. Eventually, we were able just to have the students kind of wipe things down. And then eventually we returned to in-person teaching. All last year, I had a big plexiglass wall between myself and the students, and we finally took that down when it seemed like the coast was clear. And now with the way the rates are going back up, I'm not sure what the next steps will be. But if I have to teach from here, I'm all set to do so.
You're ready.
I mean, the students like it in person, but I kind of, I enjoyed this because part of my setup, I have 2 iPads, one for visual content, like PDFs of music examples. The other one, audio. So I could play them anything that merited listening to, and of course you could share your screen and do the video thing as well. It also allowed just a deeper level of communication with not only students but colleagues, and we were all taking part in lots of therapeutic peer group talks. Victor Wooten and Steve Bailey, both of the bass department at the Berklee College of Music, were very generous in their acknowledgement of being inspired somewhat by what I had come up with. And they started inviting me to these bass hangs, for lack of a better word. And all of a sudden, here I am with my heroes like Ron Carter and Chuck Rainey. And we're just talking about how things are going. And of course, with legends like Ron or Chuck, you can't resist. Hey, can I ask you about one of these albums? And so I think a lot of us found a lot of good in having the opportunity to just spend so much time on our own stuff or being able to communicate with others. So there was this weird nostalgia I started getting, like, wow, there was something kind of okay. You discover not only other interests, but kind of deeper parts of yourself, and with my wife, the deeper parts of our relationship.
Yeah.
I just kept praying that she didn't get too tired of all my, either bad habits or baloney.
Would you say
I haven't said
one?
one cuss word yet. I'm rather proud of myself.
Peter, would you think that you turned into a little bit of a techie through this moment? Or have you always been kind of interested in that?
A techie. I'm a limited techie. I'm not afraid of the technology. Some of it is hard to wrap my head around. For example, like when the computers first came along, and by computers I'm saying when Macintosh first became available. So I had a 512. I didn't have the very first Mac. I had the second one. My father had an old Apple,
Wow.
Apple II or 2E, I forget what it was. And he was the one that like kept encouraging me. You really want to get into computing. He had IBM and all that stuff. And I was seeing the difficulties that some music industry friends of mine were having with proprietary systems, having code written, and it was clunky as could be. So the Mac promised like a lot of great things, and in the old days, my Mac, I didn't even have an external floppy drive. So anything you wanted to do, you had to keep reinserting these floppy drives just for the program to access. It had 512 kilobytes of memory.
Babies.
I mean, that's you can't
wild.
get a decent looking JPEG with that amount of information.
Right.
So, what programs came out? Well, in addition to the Mac Paint and basic kind of word processing stuff, there were third-party programs like databases. So I was creating databases for my Simmons electronic drums, and I thought, wouldn't it be amazing if you could connect the drum to the computer, and all those program settings for each sound could be just, of course that became the norm.
Mm-hmm.
But I was enjoying jumping into all that and doing basic sequencing, and I got pretty sophisticated, or achieved fairly sophisticated results by sequencing. Once that reached a point of like, all of a sudden audio and now it's just what everybody does in Ableton and all this stuff.
Right.
I kind of couldn't wrap my head around that system,
Mm-hmm.
the way Ableton Live works. And oddly enough, I sort of regressed. So now most of my music creation is with a pencil and a piece of paper.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't, I sort of abandoned the virtual reality music thing, even though, this new computer I'm setting up, I've got all the Spectrasonics keyboard sounds and Omnisphere and blah, blah, blah. It's cool stuff, but it's just, I don't know. For me, the greatest joy in creating music now is it's pretty simplistic kind of recording here, or writing it for others to bring to life.
Mm-hmm. I see.
And I don't score, television. I did do a documentary recently. That was always my fantasy. I wanted to be a film composer someday. I was doing a lot of theater stuff.
Oh, okay.
But now, the amount of knowledge and hard work it takes to do a show, this is, I think, better left to younger, more technically adept, or better trained composers.
Well,
So oddly enough, the technology has kind of allowed me to find a little more of a lot of my simple abilities, and so I'm not turning my back on technology. I'm just realizing some things are not as easy to wrap one's head around.
I mean, it sounds like you were very, very like hip in the very beginning. I mean, even now you've kind of embraced this whole, video recording through Zoom, doing lessons, and I love the way your outlook on. I mean, the past few years were kind of, it was easy to be negative, but you kind of have gotten to see like this positive side to it, where now there's kind of this new thing that. I mean, what I've noticed with some of my students is like the chance to record the lesson when it's in person is kind of gone now, because unless you bring, but it's not,
Right.
you can't see the screen, or, like you were sharing it, or it's not as, in a way, like you said, it's almost more interactive on some levels.
Exactly, exactly. I mean, in my studio at the university, I have a small Zoom camera hooked up to a large 4K monitor. I bought it at Best Buy or Costco. Um, Remarkable deals on that stuff. Anyway, I can record the students, then we can listen and watch it back. Um, and if a student comes here, I might record them in my setup, which is kind of like, well, I default, I say it's my Pro Tools setup, but actually what I've been using for live stuff and for video captures, I use Luna.
Oh yeah.
It's made by Universal Audio because I have Universal Audio interfaces.
Yeah. So do
And
I.
so with my iMac, that was offloading a lot of the computing uh, power responsibilities. So the machine wasn't being taxed quite so much. But now I've got a new MacBook Pro, and I'm looking into this external monitor. So my original plan, I was going to get a Mac Studio.
Oh yeah. Those are great. I was looking at those too.
It looked amazing.
Yeah.
So I finally said, okay, good. So in April, I ordered it, and it was supposed to be delivered 3 days ago. And then I got the email saying, well, delivery now at some point in September.
Oh,
So I was like, I want to use the summer. I don't want to keep
of course.
waiting. Because, the hard drive, my iMac was not that old, but it was from 2014.
Mm-hmm.
And in tech terms or tech years, that's a little bit old.
Right.
So I found by just going to the Apple store and then trying different configurations, all of a sudden I came up with this very maxed out MacBook Pro that they had in stock.
Perfect.
And I just said, I'm getting it. And it's a happy accident because having this 14-inch additional screen, and then on the other side of the room, of course, I have a remote screen so I can operate the computer from the drum set. But this is pretty great. And like I showed you earlier, it does have that kind of
Yeah,
cool.
That's the coolest part.
See, you're killing it, man. I mean, I'm so jealous because I've been looking to upgrade to one of those computers, so I was nerding out on all the specs. So you're talking my language right now.
Well, okay. So the things okay, again, this is just from a little bit of reading I've done. But one of the great things about the Apple Studio is the way it handles thermal issues. It's got a very large heat sink, and so it doesn't get too stressed. And with the MacBook Pro, especially if you operate it with the lid closed, there's always a threat of some overheating. And if the fan kicks in, might that make noise? Because this is a one-room studio. So anyway, I got a small stand for the MacBook, which also allows me a place to put the keyboard if I want to get a little more desk space. I'm kind of in hog heaven. I've got great monitor speakers. I've got a beautiful desk, the pull-out thing for the keyboard. I had this IKEA desk for years. This was an odd duck of a desk. and I forget the name of it. It had some, it's like a Swedish heavy metal band name. Uh, but like uh, there's a whole thing on the internet. Like there's a support group for people looking for these desks or for spare parts because it was, like IKEA often does. They discontinue.
Okay.
Yeah.
They're kind of like Yamaha that way. They just keep discontinuing stuff. Um, but these desks are quite popular. So I didn't want to get rid of it, but I did get myself a proper studio desk. And, it's nice. I'm going to be spending a lot of time in here. And right now, I mean, the bulk of my energy is, in addition to teaching, is just trying to archive, thousands of photographs. Most of the stuff that was in old shoe boxes has been scanned, but now it's a matter of organizing.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, it turned out I was the guy in a lot of bands. Let me see. Oh yeah, good. Just wanted to make sure I was plugged in. I wasn't operating on battery power.
Oh yeah. See, he's an expert, man. I love it
Don't put it past Peter.
I was talking with Sprague a lot over the pandemic.
He also a techie.
Yeah, and that's one thing I love about that guy. We would sit on the phone and just talk for an hour about, hey, so how are you what are you doing this? Okay, I'm gonna try that. What's your set? Oh, that's different than mine.
Oh, he's a genius.
Yeah, man, he's so great. So I love how you just embraced it and just the whole. I mean, I just think it's really cool. I mean, and you're obviously got it dialed. So
well, it's fun. But what I was beginning to say, Lou, is that I was the only guy in a lot of bands who had a camera.
Oh, okay.
And I wasn't shy about taking photos. And indeed, I mean, musicians would often let their guard down because it wasn't some who's this taking a photo.
Right, of course.
Hey, so I don't mean to try to compare myself to Milt Hinton. He was a wonderful jazz bassist who had a reputation for having taken some of the best photographs of jazz musicians. But maybe of this new generation, I can include myself with the likes of Tony Levin, who also is a very prolific photographer. I mean, Tony will take when I was working with him in Japan, he had this brand new Sony digital camera, pretty big thing, and he would just take it out as the audience was applauding, and he would take shots, or even if he had 4-bar rest, he'd pick it up. So he got some really cool. He has great stage photos. I don't. Drummers, we don't tend to have that luxury of time. Like I said, all 4 limbs are usually doing something.
So you were kind of going down memory lane.
Memory lane.
I'm sure you found some. What were some of the interesting ones maybe that you had forgotten about?
Well, the cool thing with scanning, and I got I was trying negative scanning on a flatbed, and that's like. Then I finally got this old Nikon negative scanner to work, for me to understand how it worked. And I was finding photos that had never even been developed by the shop I took it to, because maybe half of the image had been exposed to some light to the cartridge, or the camera got opened accidentally. One time I thought the film had rewound, and I opened the back of the camera and it hadn't.
Oh, okay.
So a lot of, maybe most of that roll was no good, but there were, and all of a sudden I found there was a picture of Freddie Hubbard and George Duke, a beautiful photo of them both laughing. And then another one of Jocko.
Wow.
Had all this kind of a rainbow effect on the top half, but you could see him.
Yeah.
And so now I'm okay, like Photoshop. I've never really see, this is the nutty thing, because I do the home recording, but I still am not great at like Pro Tools, just managing the files or doing the edits.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know what's stopping me, but I've got to figure that one out, and I would love to figure out Photoshop. But meanwhile, I keep spending all this money on programs that promise some measure of AI usually sometimes with ghastly results. But
Trying to make it easier.
there's this new program that this archivist hit me to called made by the company named Topaz, and it'll just make I think there are a number of them, and I'm the sucker on Facebook. It'll see one of these things and click on it, but it shows you like the photo before and after, and how you can make a slightly fuzzy looking photo look a little almost crystal clear.
Mm-hmm.
And so with some like old photo scans or scans of old photos from like that I did a long time ago, of my parents maybe, or when we were kids, all of a sudden, holy cow, this software really does kind of bring it to life.
Oh,
and
cool.
so some of it's just for like the occasional fun posting on Facebook, but ultimately I would like to put together a book,
Oh, okay.
because most of the musicians were my friends, but some of them were just I was lucky enough to be in the same space with them.
Mm-hmm.
And I got photos that seem unique and of historical enough significance that I'd like to share them with fans, because now I'm realizing it's next week will be my 50th anniversary of going on the road professionally for the first time. Well, now, yeah, a lot of those sessions, particularly stuff with the Weather Report or Steps Ahead with Michael Brecker, being on tour with Jaco, or any of the ECM stuff in Europe, or jazz festivals where you just get thrown together with a lot of different musicians. These were rare and unique opportunities for grabbing some good shots. So all to say that I love drumming as much as ever, and I'm still dedicated to teaching, but maybe my greatest pleasure day to day comes from when I get to spend time with the photography.
That's great. Yeah, I think that's a wonderful idea. I mean, I would love to see those photos.
And my new album.
There we go. I was checking
this
out.
I'm going to take off this. Let me take off this shiny.
I think I saw this on your website.
Aha!
Live in Italy.
They can send a man to the moon. At least we used to be able to. But still no easy way to get this. Anyway, just got a link to today's. You seeing that is it backwards or is it?
No, it's great.
No, it's in.
No, it's perfect.
Oh, good.
Yeah, that's great.
There you go.
So that's people can find that on your website then.
On my website or
Perfect.
at Amazon. Downbeat just gave it a lovely 4-star review.
Great.
Right on.
Our clever. We made it look like a menu.
Oh, cool.
That's funny.
with a CD of spaghetti vongole.
Gratitude.
Anyway, I took the cover photo, and it's a very nice kind of almost abstract looking thing.
Yeah.
I just with my iPhone and messed around with it. So yeah, it's all good fun, and I'm really enjoying this new computer. This video thing is pretty.
Yeah, that's great. It's working perfect.
It's very slick.
I mean, so Peter, you were saying, you couldn't help but ask some of these people that are around you what it was like to, I mean, these guys are giants, and I consider you one of these giants. So it's interesting to see you kind of feel like that amongst through your career, playing with different people. What can you maybe just, what was it like to play, and how did you learn from these guys on the road and on the bandstand?
Well, this brings up an interesting topic, because my greatest lament for right now is that younger musicians don't have the opportunity to play on stage as much as we did. And when I say we didn't have the opportunity to play as much as our heroes did. I mean, these musicians were playing 50 weeks a year, maybe 6 or 7 nights a week, 3 to 4 sets a night, oftentimes opposite another band. Cannonball Adderley's band was playing opposite Art Blakey's band.
Right.
I mean, so all the musicians had to be, on their toes. And so my generation or following generations, we compare ourselves to our heroes, and we want to aspire to, can we play like that? And we have so many fewer opportunities to play, unless we're doing it in a practice room. And oftentimes, everything you see on the internet, for the most part, are play along. So it's a one-way street. And of course, always with the be sure to hit the like button, and make sure you subscribe. So it gets reduced down to that, and so I see and hear a lot of great ability, and very high levels of playing. But these musicians are not dealing with a band that, half the band had maybe too much spaghetti for dinner, and the other half maybe had too much coffee, or one player is throwing out this confusing musical signal to you, or the tempo was counted off, too quick or too slow, or the acoustic. I mean, there's a lot of things, and this is what made live music what it was. So whenever I see anyone like he or she is the next whatever, it seems to be kind of missing the point. And we know, I mean, with youth always comes a necessary amount of swagger and maybe even arrogance, but for the most part, it just came naturally to me to offer up complete respect to any musician that had been doing it longer than I had been, even if I thought they sounded pretty square. Just so you had to show the respect, and then you often were the recipient or the beneficiary of some of their wisdom. And so they might become just a very momentary mentor, or a long-lasting mentor and influence. But it was always necessary to show the respect, and so in touring we got to do that, and so that was kind of the process of and I'm not a poker player, so my enthusiasm, if I had it, which I usually did, meeting other musicians, was genuine, and they sensed that I was, I'm a fan. And I think in jazz, certainly in drumming, and I can't speak for other musics, but in my experience in the musical travels I've done it, there's a great desire, almost like an instinct, to pay it forward. The musicians want to make sure that the next generation knows what to do. Now, I don't want to make it sound like everyone is having to play in their second bedroom, or whatever. A lot of our current students or graduating students who have graduated from the Thornton School of Music at USC, they're making some incredible noise on concert stages. So, they're finding the playing opportunities, many of which maybe are invisible or not occurring to older, because I wow, I didn't even know about that place. Whereas earlier, I think we knew the jazz clubs, but the jazz club scene changed. The economics have changed, so there are all these other venues which are answering the need that people still want to experience music live.
Right.
That's good.
Yeah. Definitely.
And yeah, so far, knock on wood, I'm my memory is still functioning uh, at a fairly okay level. Um, and so I can still put together the stories that go along with the photos.
That's great.
And
In your next book, in this photo book, are you gonna give little captions or explanations? Are you planning it to only be for lack of better words, a picture book, book of memories that way?
question, I think a hybrid.
Cool.
Um, some pictures will speak well enough for themselves, and then others it might be fun to include. But my last book that I wrote that was anecdotal. I mean, it was an autobiography. It was called No Beethoven.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of,
yeah,
it's pretty talky. So I'll I'll try to master the art of becoming more succinct. Impossible, but it's fun. Getting a word limit. Any kind of limitation is good, because then you've got a canvas to work with, and then
Sure.
all right, these are my boundaries, and so how can I make the most of this, and then how can I make the most of this without putting too much information into that space.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
That's the art of drumming. How can I make the most compelling music without just flooding the zone with notes.
Right. I think that's a great analogy. What?
Not a bad. That'll be on my tombstone someday.
So, I mean, I have to ask you. I mean, what was it like playing with some of these giants in jazz? I mean, just their place in history is forever kind of engraved in people like all these players you've played with. I mean, I know I have to be that guy like you were saying that you were, where I have to ask you about, like, what was it like playing with Weather Report and with Jocko and going on the road with them?
that's the question I'm asking myself. What was it like playing?
I'm sure, but not even just specifically Weather Report. I mean, just anything that kind of maybe just really still sticks with you.
Well, Weather Report deserves to be specifically mentioned because it was a unique circumstance in that I was working for Joe and Wayne. I mean, and Jocko, but I mean, Joe and Wayne, it was their band.
Of course.
And this was a band that I loved as soon as I heard their first album. It was a band that I loved when I heard their last album before I joined. That was Heavy Weather. I said to Jocko, I met him and he played the cassette for us that evening. I was on tour with Maynard Ferguson's band as his drummer. And I said to Jocko, I said, this is the version of Weather Report I've been waiting for all my life. So I never had any inkling or thought of, hey, I should, I mean, I just thought this band now with this guy, Alex Acuna, playing the drums, it's perfect.
Mm-hmm.
I hope it never changes. So when I got the call, when Alex left the band and they needed a drummer, I was as surprised as anyone. And at the so we had a quick rehearsal. They set aside 3 days or something to rehearse, and we just kind of jammed one night, and that was sort of my audition. And Joe said, we don't need to rehearse. They were they were pretty jazzed up, and I had done all my homework, so we went to Japan, and we were all excited, although I'm sure those guys were worried how would I fare in concert. And before any of this takes place, there's a press conference, because I was a brand new drummer and nobody knew who I was, with the exception that I'd been to Japan twice before, but as a drummer for the big bands of Stan Kenton and Maynard Ferguson. So the question that is asked of me, and I don't remember at what point at the press conference, but it was the first question that was addressed to me. And he said, Peter, Peter-san, you've played with Stan Kenton and Maynard Ferguson, how does this qualify you to play for Weather Report? And that was just kind of the way it got translated. The Japanese would never ask anything, I think, pointedly kind of challenging like that or rude. But I think, wow, hey fellas, come on, give me a break. I haven't even played my first show yet. And so I start to give this, well, good music is good music, is some ridiculous answer. And Zavinul kind of waves me off, and he leans into his microphone. And he said, Weather Report is a big band, and we're a small group too. Next question.
Nice.
So, he was like, it's no different. And in fact, I've often stated that had Weather Report heard me, if Joe and Wayne had heard me with either Kenton or Maynard, I think they would have passed on the idea of inviting me. But they were just going on the strength of Jocko's recommendation, because Jocko had seen me live. And Joe and Wayne had both played with Maynard Ferguson. It was one of their first big gigs when they were starting out. And when they heard Kenton, they were sort of remembering the Stan Kenton band of the 50s. And so they were kind of intrigued, like, wow, this could be interesting that we have a guy that's done this stuff. And then what sealed the deal, the playing went well, and I was learning. I was a quick learner, and I had a lot of energy to spare. And what I might have lacked in subtlety, I definitely made up for in energy. But there was an acoustic piano backstage somewhere, and I just sat down and helped myself, and I was playing just a very simple Bach 2-part invention. Not trying to show off. It was an empty backstage. And unbeknownst to me, Jocko had come backstage, and he heard me, and he didn't make his presence known. But then he ran and told Joe and Wayne. He said, "This cat's playing Bach." The first 2-part invention is really, really basic, and I'm sure I wasn't playing it well. But the fact that I had some keyboard skill and classical music to boot, really, that sort of elevated their perception of me. So it bought me a little bit of, whatever they didn't like about my drumming, they respected more or less the package. And again, my ability to recognize that these musicians know more about this stuff than I do is part of what kept me in the drummer's seat, when plenty of times I otherwise would have been tempted to, like, I don't need this. I'm going to go home, because it was a hot seat, the drummer's seat. And that sophomore touring period, Zavinul was being very demanding, and I began doubting myself and second guessing some of my drumming choices. And that was just a little bit I realized it was a little bit of the hangover, the old bebop, combined with this kind of Ubermensch, Superman, Nietzschean sort of point of view that Zavinul enjoyed, which, what doesn't kill me makes me stronger. Or, and a lot of these guys came out of that whole school of jazz, which, looked up to Miles Davis, as much as they hated being considered, the child or stepchild of Miles. And Miles was into boxing, and Zavinul was into boxing, and that became a metaphor and a whole way of talking about the music. And I think what I eventually realized, Louis, was that, if you're working with a boxer, they like it when you punch back.
Great advice.
That's so good.
So finally, when I punched back, I thought that maybe I was going to get fired. I mean, I punched back musically.
Right. Of course.
And the next day, the manager came up to me before the sound check and said, Joe would like to see you in the dressing room.
Dun, dun, dun.
I thought, uh-oh, this is it. And when I walk in, there's the whole band and the entire crew, and everyone has these little plastic cups of cognac. And Joe hands me one, and he turns to everyone and goes, "Hey, everybody, last night, Peter graduated." So, they were waiting for me to become more of my own musician. Of course, perfect timing. We're talking about Joe Zawinul because July 7th is his birthday, and he was born 90 years ago today.
Oh,
right. Happy birthday, Joe.
That's something.
Wow.
That's perfect.
Let's get some cognac. No, I'm kidding.
So let me ask you, I always find it interesting. What was it like? Maybe you could give us some insight. I mean, I think a lot of people ask you probably, what was it like playing with these guys? How was it on the bandstand? But maybe what was it like being on the road and maybe off the bandstand? And do you have any recommendations for people that may end up touring and working as a working professional musician? Like what is something that maybe is not talked about, is overlooked, but it's still very much a part of gigging every day?
The first advice Zawinul gave me was always be good to the people that handle your food and your bags. And so a very important part of Weather Report was the fact or not, but could you all sit down and enjoy a meal together? There was one drummer who Joe loved, but he said it just became impossible to go out and eat because the guy was just very combative with service persons. And Joe said it just became a drag.
Yeah.
And so they made a change in the band, just like, we can't continue living like this, because to them the life off the bandstand was every bit as important as life on the bandstand, and they were deadly serious about on the bandstand. I mean, Weather Report, we would be invited to parties or a club or this or that after a concert, and we were in somebody's house, and they had to drive us whatever 20 25 minutes. It seemed like a long time, and it was Zawinul, myself, and Jocko, and we're in this small little circle. And I think Jocko said, "Hey, every time we go to a party, it's just we end up just the three of us standing around talking. So why don't we just do it back at the hotel? It'd be a lot simpler." And we were like, "Yeah." So I think the word went out to the road manager, like, tell everybody thanks, but no thanks.
Right.
So we just we'd go back to the hotel, and we would talk about the music, but we could do it somewhere where it wasn't too noisy. And and so it often had to do with just kind of quality of life things,
right.
like that.
That makes sense. I think that's very insightful, especially just, I mean, you're going to be with these people, you're working with them every day. I can understand how, I mean, that would take a huge effect on the bandstand, especially just having a peace of mind of being able to interact. And
there's one musician I know, brilliant musician, unbelievable musician. When you're having dinner, every time he would make any kind of point or say anything, he would punctuate it, but very, like, he would really slap the table. I mean, just like, and I said, I can never tour with this person. It just will drive me completely nuts. I can't, so we all get real finicky. I mean,
right.
Our daughter, she, like, mouth noises really get to her. So if you were someone that had that sensitivity, I forget the name of the condition, but if someone made loud smacking noises every time they ate, it would just be too, like, life's too short, and you either have to get some therapy to get over that, or find someone that knows how to chew a little more quietly.
That's funny.
So yeah, it would oftentimes it would come down to stuff like that. Yeah, boy, great player. I just, it was so funny. Um, there are some jazz musicians who had a reputation for being very finicky about their hotel rooms on tour. And this was the very beginning of a tour with Gary Burton. And we were going to be rehearsing in New York. And when I got to my hotel room, and it was like early spring, the window was broken. The room was quite cold, and I tried to shut the window, and someone had broken it off the rail or something. But you know, clearly I couldn't spend the night in there. It was just it was too cold. So I grab my bags. I go back down, and the elevator door opens, and I'm coming out of the elevator with my bags, and Gary's about to go up to his room. So he instantly puts two and two together that I'm going to change my room. And he just looked at me and he went, "Oh, so you're one of those."
Oh.
Oh shoot!
No, I think Gary, the window's broken in my. Okay. Yeah.
I mean that kind of goes.
My nephew Damien,
Uh-huh.
or a wonderful bass player, not only a great musician, but I don't think I've ever gotten to a hotel lobby before him on a day that we're either going to the gig or checking out of a hotel, and it's wow, it's not only very professional, but it's courteous, it's very kind, that not make people wait for you. And some people are on the other side of the clock. And so for some, well, Buddy Rich was an example. There's a story about this trumpet player joined Buddy's band, and the manager went up to him and said, "One thing you got to know: if you're on time, you're late."
You're late. Yep.
And the stories were legion of a guy coming out the door of the hotel. Clock, there it is, 10 o'clock. Buddy said, "Go." And the guy's running after the bus down the street. I mean, Buddy could be pretty severe with that stuff, but the travel thing. I mean, now the travel thing is just like, are the planes running on time, and am I going to get sick?
Sure.
So I took the summer off. I didn't want to go to Europe, of course, with the war. I didn't feel comfortable traveling, and with the pandemic still the way it is, I just thought now I did. I had one tour scheduled. Well, when I saw you in San Diego, and then we played the concert in La Jolla. The next morning, we were supposed to fly to New Mexico, and I was not feeling 100% while I was driving back to Los Angeles from La Jolla.
Mm-hmm.
And about 4 o'clock that morning, we were supposed to be at the airport like a little after 6. When I woke up, I knew something was not right, and I took the test, and I was positive, so I had to cancel the whole tour. It happens.
Still a reality. I had another question. I mean, some of these, you're on so many recordings, you've done so many projects with different people, whether you're leading them or as a sideman. It seems to me that it's so versatile. I think that's one thing that you're known for, at least to me. What's something that maybe you can help some students with, or give insight for people like us? What's something that makes you like that? Is it just you're into a lot of different styles of music? You're just
I grew up when jazz was all over television. Even popular radio stations,
right.
And every television show, these were jazz arrangers, these were jazz musicians in the studios. Everything had, a lot of jazz, and then the Beatles came along, and I was checking out Elvis Presley before the Beatles and stuff. I was pretty young. And I was checking out Harry Belafonte. I mean, I got exposed to a lot of different styles of music, and I love the Beatles, and I love James Brown, and I loved Count Basie. So it felt natural to gravitate towards all those things. Nothing was off limits.
Right.
Um, and and now with YouTube and the like, I mean, there's not just an embarrassment of riches, it's
Yeah, I know what you
an
mean.
ocean, a deep ocean of
Yeah.
riches. And it's hard to find things when there's so much on the menu.
Yeah.
And when we were young, I'm sorry to put it that way, but let me show you. So you got a record. This is random. This is Chico O'Farrell, Nine Flags, and you could read about all the musicians. Sometimes it'd be photos of the musicians,
Right.
of course, all their names, and that was the one album that you bought, and there was usually less than 20 minutes of music per side, so you spend a lot of time with that music, and you learned first note to last.
Mm-hmm.
And you knew everything about the recording. And so you knew who the guitarist was, who was the bass player. You started recognizing how certain rhythm sections played together compared to other rhythm sections. Wow, it's interesting when I hear this drummer doing this compared to when I hear this drummer doing that, or this drummer with a different bass player. And when you have 100,000, or well, in the old days it was 10,000 tunes in your iPod or your iPhone, it's hard to build that same kind of intimate relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Music, and oftentimes, people they don't know who the musicians are. I mean, I was doing a series of master classes with some musicians overseas, and I gave them assigned listening, and I said, I want you to research it, and I included the names of the musician, and then I said, who's playing drums? It was a Cannibal Adderley thing, and they didn't know, and they'd supposedly been studying this music, and class was over early that day. I flipped out. I said, how? And I played the "How dare you not know that's Louis Hayes?
Mm-hmm.
How dare you not know that's Sam Jones?" And so then that becomes a curiosity for me. Why would I go there? Number one, I take it seriously. Number two, there was always a sense that because of the sacrifice of the travel and the way race relations were in America, it was a perilous thing for people to travel and play this music, for people anyone just to get through day-to-day life.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not going to steer us towards a social, political, whatever, but that's just the reality.
I see what you mean. Yeah, it's definitely a part of it.
Yeah. And so to not recognize on the most basic level the names of these men and women, but primarily men in the case of most recorded jazz, particularly of the bebop era, not exclusively, but to me is just it not only dishonors their memory, but it makes me question, how serious are you if you want to learn this? Oh, I want to be a jazz drummer. Well, what have you listened to? And then, that'd be like, I told my wife, at one point I was getting a lot of rock drummers, some of them well known, who wanted to study with me because the word had gotten out, like, he's the guy to study with. And I'm glad that word is now come and gone. But I told my wife, I said, it's kind of like getting a knock at the front door and here's some guy wearing a beret and holding a big loaf of bread and goes, "Hi, I want to be French." Like, okay.
Couldn't even say bonjour.
Huh? Hey, I want to be jazz. Let me learn. There's a whole vocabulary, there's a whole language to this music. I mean, what would I do if my friend Robert Trujillo called me up from Metallica and said, "Hey
Yeah.
Pete, can you sub for Lars tomorrow night?" I'd say,
Oh,
Bob, you're calling the wrong guy. I
whoa.
don't speak that language. I mean, even if I had the ears and the muscles to try to do it, I said no.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
So uh, at a certain point, you can realize your limitations. But if you are serious about something, then you only do yourself a favor by learning some of the background and uh, nowadays so many things are automated. I mean, that's why I don't know Photoshop still, because I buy these programs that, hey, let the artificial intelligence handle it, and then you look at the image and the guy, um, it looks pretty good, but the mustache on his lips looks like a sneaker. It's just like what? Um, so some things require just a little more attention to
Right.
detail.
No, I think that's a great outlook to have, and there's a lesson in taking it seriously, especially for some of these students and people that are wanting to play this kind of music. And I mean, this goes for myself. I'm still learning and trying to dive as deep as I can. So I appreciate that mentality.
Well, it sounds. I thank you, Louis, and it sounds a little highfalutin. Let me put it on simpler terms, okay? Um, Play what you want to hear. All right. But if you are gonna, if you want to recite French poetry, learn the language. Otherwise, you'll be stuck to parroting a couple phrases you've learned, and then you can't really enjoy it. So there's a great story that Branford Marsalis told on himself. And so he was, I think they were sitting in an airport departure lounge somewhere. And he had his headphones on. He's listening to John Coltrane. And Art Blakey, like, hey, what are you listening to? Bradford was kind of like, please listen to John Coltrane. And Art Blakey started berating him. You dumb, you dumb, expletive deleted. You dumb, said it 3 times.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Who did Coltrane listen to? He wasn't listening to John Coltrane. Who was he listening to? That's who you need to listen to.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the wake up call that older generation folks felt compelled to tell us, and that we in turn want to pass along. Some people are receptive, and some people are not. And the ones who are receptive, to me, just have a greater foundation going forward.
Mm-hmm.
My teacher years ago, this is in the early 70s, had an expression. He'd say, there's always going to be that kid with the purple drumsticks that comes along. And he would follow that up with, he said, you have to find and sustain your own set of lasting musical values. And so that keeps you on a path of sorts,
mm-hmm.
And as you get a little older, some people reach it sooner, and then you just start realizing there are not only some musics that maybe I'm not suited to play, but there's also some musics I just don't want to bother playing, and these are better left to someone with the right energy or enthusiasm to it. So on that note, I do have a gig tonight, however.
What are you doing tonight?
I'm working with the great pianist Roger Kellaway.
Oh, I got to meet that guy. He came to my jam session one day.
Really?
Yeah, and I didn't know who it was, and I was talking with him. He's really nice. He came up to us, and then my bass player, I think it was Mac,
probably, was
like, dude, that's Roger Kellaway. And I was like, wait, who's that? And he starts telling me. I was like, and then I asked him, and he's like, he was in town or something. It was so random. It was the most random thing ever.
Well, I mean, I first became aware of him on the Oliver Nelson album, More Blues Than the Abstract Truth,
Mm.
the 60s. But, he worked with Sonny Rollins. I mean, he just worked with so many people, and then came out to LA. And I don't know if you remember that old TV show, All in the Family,
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
with Carol O'Connor and Rob Reiner. And he was the end theme, the piano, that stride piano playing, that was him. And anyway, Roger is joining forces with the incredible clarinetist Eddie Daniels, who is generally recognized as being still the greatest living jazz clarinet player. Incredible clarinet player of any style of music, and he still plays a mean tenor saxophone too. Bassist Mike Valerio, who's very busy, particularly in the studios here in Los Angeles, and myself. We rehearsed yesterday. It was very fun.
Cool.
And so that's down in Irvine, or where you are, I should say. It's up in Irvine, or over in Irvine. I
Right.
don't know where Irvine is. I rely on my car navigator to get me there.
Actually, I'll be in Irvine on Saturday. So
There you go. Well,
yeah.
close, but
Well,
so
that's
anyway, to our developing and learning musicians out there, who I still like to count myself, it can be as simple as just playing what you want to hear. And with the pandemic, I think we can all be a little bit more forgiving of ourselves and each other. We should have fun when we play, and make music just for the sheer pleasure of it, and maybe make music that you think might make the world slightly a slightly better place. So I approach most things with a combination of the drummer who's been in a lot of bands, but the child of a doctor who taught me, among other things, do no harm. So that's the way I try to go through life, and the days I don't, then the next day is a chance to be better.
I love it. Matt, do you have anything?
That was a wrap up, by the way, Louie.
I felt it. That's why I looked at it. I was like,
any more questions over here? I got a ton of questions,
Uh-oh.
Peter, but
I got time. Make it a good one.
Let me think of a. Yeah, this is. I always ask, my heroes and people that I really look up to, what is their key to longevity? You've been such a consistent drummer throughout your career, not really seeming to slow down, and so I'm just curious, what is a routine maybe that has stayed with you in your life that's led you to this longevity, and that could be non-musical too. So do you have anything that you do very consistently with the extension of music?
I mean, the first answer comes to mind is, for me, finding a good partner to go through life with. And my wife and I will be celebrating our 35th wedding anniversary tomorrow.
oh,
Congratulations.
Thank you. We have two wonderful children who are both in the biz,
Movie star.
not music biz, and
Obi-Wan.
show biz, Hollywood.
Obi-Wan.
Yeah, Maya was in Obi-Wan,
Yeah.
and she's filming a new show, Mr. and Mrs. Smith,
Right on.
with Donald Glover. She's Mrs. Smith.
What a great last
wow,
name.
cool.
And for those of you watching Maya, you may have seen her in Pen 15.
Mm-hmm.
She co-created that with her comedy partner at the time, Anna Conkle. Now Anna's off doing her thing and Maya's doing theirs, and I'm sure they'll get back together at some point. But Maya had to stop wearing a bowl haircut wig and pretending she was 13 years old.
That was such a weird show.
Especially after she gave birth to
Such
our
a cool
grandson. So anyway, just having a responsibility that extends beyond just worrying about your ego, how you or something. And years ago, I was given advice to listen to all kinds of music. So I tried not to be too much of a snob. And then eventually realizing, well, I can't play every style. I wanted to be that drummer that could play everything, because that's studio drummers seem to that you needed that ability. And I try to play whatever I do play with a good measure of whatever authenticity I can bring to it, um, and always with some sense of musicality. Uh, and so yeah, I'm kind of very serious when I work, but I find that's kind of an energizing quality to have. Although a lot of times I'll walk out of a studio feeling like I left a lot of myself on the floor. Um, and as a result, compared to a lot of my colleagues, I don't do that much studio work. Um, and jazz has always taken priority and precedence. And so, of my drumming colleagues, of the ones who have the ability to play a backbeat, not just a kind of a jazz backbeat, but I feel pretty good about my level of swing playing. I'm pretty comfortable with knowing how to swing. And if nothing else, I've learned to trust music, so I don't again need to flood it with too much information. And ultimately, I think if there's any longevity in terms of people wanting to work with me, my approach is kind of a time-honored one that Papa Joe Jones said, and Buddy Rich paraphrased, but it basically comes down to playing in such a way that you make the other musicians sound better, sound and play better. So, if I get a compliment from another musician, it's generally not, "Wow, that was some really fast stuff you were playing," or "That's an incredible right foot you have." But it's more like, "Hey, I didn't have to fight to play," or "You really made it easy." And that's nice. That's a nice reward. And so that's I kind of put my energy into composing the drum parts as I'm doing them, and so I just take advantage of opportunities to play with a lot of dynamic contrast, play simply, and then it's interesting. And if something's interesting, then your brain is engaged, and then that, I think, keeps you young.
I love it.
Plus my morning Sudoku ritual, and I also do spelling bee and Wordle.
I was gonna say, do you do Wordle? Yeah. Right
Well,
on, Peter. Thank you.
I think that was a great sum up. Peter, I just want to say thank you for your time. Thank you for doing this.
My pleasure.
It was so wonderful to meet you, get to hear you in the masterclass, and special thanks to Gilbert for introducing us, and Bob Magnuson. So,
oh yeah, and that's a wonderful what Gilbert's doing.
Oh, the Young Lions, yeah.
Yeah, and that was a terrific young drummer I got to work with.
I really liked how you interacted with him. I wanted to tell you that.
Oh, thank you.
I thought it was very encouraging, but you had very pointed advice, but without like destroying him. You know what I'm saying? Like I thought it was a very unique exchange, and the way you sing, the way you played, the difference of the different things you were showing and explaining, I thought was very clear.
Oh, good. Well, I hope he got something out of it, and that the others in the audience, and a big shout out again to Gilbert Castellanos and the whole San Diego jazz community, and that includes Holly Hoffman and Mike Wolf and who's Holly's partner is
Mike Wofford.
Mike Wofford. Excuse me. Mike Wolf's another piano player. Mike Wofford. Peter Sprague, Bob Magnuson.
Oh, and Jim Plank was there.
Jim Plank,
yeah,
my hero. All the cats. Hey, I want to get down there and play in this new band shell you guys have.
The radio show. Yeah, it's very nice.
I played at the old one with the symphony and Seth MacFarlane. We did a couple nights, but that was a pretty basic level outdoor stage. Kind of temporary feeling and looking. So this new band shell looks wonderful, and the city deserves that. And you got a great baseball team.
Yeah,
even though the Dodgers are we got the slight edge in the rankings, but
Yeah, well, we hope you can come down. I would definitely go see you. Gilbert's been doing some great shows there, so I'm sure it's just a matter of time.
yeah, he did one. He did one just recently,
Yeah.
right?
He's on the board. So you should
Yeah,
give him a call.
Okay, I will.
Well,
Put in a
thanks.
good word for you.
Thank you, Peter. Once again, we appreciate you, and we hope you have a great gig tonight. And thank you so much.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you. Greetings, everyone.
See
Bye.
ya.
A jive symphonic funk of off-tone melodies and open-tone vibrations. It's life.